Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good. From science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I am Rafe, and again this week I am solo because Harry is hiatusing, taking a little break from his co-host duties, but we shall soldier on, as they say, and keep bringing you the Bufnagle content you so richly deserve. Before we go any further, I want to thank you guys, all of you guys out there, for making us a global top 10% podcast. We have the world's greatest listeners, as you know, because you are some of them. As usual, you can reach us at bufnagle.com. Remember to share the love, share the buff, give us a 5-star review, subscribe, like, smiley star, tell a friend to listen, and you will get a free episode. And we're going to do a little thing starting this week that we didn't want to do for a while, and we figured we'll give this a whirl because of the current nature of things. And we have, people have talked to us a lot about sponsorships and ad revenue and all that kind of stuff. And it's something we generally don't like to do because it puts us in a position to advertise products that we may be lukewarm about, or maybe it's a difficult game. And if you ever want to have the conversation, send me a note. We'll have a phone call and I'll tell you about how ads work in the podcast space. But there's a thing that we've taken on, which is if people have said, how can we help you out? What can we do? And we have found a way to have you guys help us out. And if you would like to help us out, that would be a wonderful thing. If you want to say, no way, you keep delivering the free episodes that I've come to know and love, then feel free to do that as well. But there are some of you who have asked to be able to reach out and help. And we are, like I said, an independent podcast, and we do all of this through the joy that it brings us in our hearts. But sometimes there are some other things that can help bring more joyous joy. So we have opened up what we call a Buy Me a Coffee account. And if you would like to buy the buff a cup of coffee, that would be a wonderful thing. There will be, if you look in the what do they call it? The show notes, the information that's on the information that tells you what's in this episode, kind of the summary stuff. It's somewhere on the page that you're listening to this on your phone, or somewhere on the screen in front of you. There are show notes, and in the show notes you will see a link there. It says something like, you can buy the buff a cup of coffee, and you click on that link and you type in some stuff, and you can send us essentially a cup of coffee, which is a wonderful thing to do. It's a low budget thing. We're pretty low budget. We don't have a lot of expenses. We have some microphones and headphones and things like that. And actually the biggest expense is hosting this stuff out on the interwebs. People, go figure, people charge money to have us use their software and use their servers out in the clouds. And that's not a de minimis expense, as they say. It does add up over the course of the year. And it's if you would like to buy us a cup of coffee, that would do wonders for the accounting purposes here at the Buff. So if you would like to go to the show notes and click that thing, buy us a cup of coffee, we would all be eternally grateful. And the other thing you can do, hey, share the love, share the buff. Tell people we are out there. Hopefully we're bringing you the kinds of stuff that you like to listen to. That would be a wonderful thing if you could do that. But you are under no obligation to do so. We will soldier on regardless. But if you'd like to take a turn shouldering the load, as they say, we would not turn that down, and we would be very grateful, as we always are. We'd be even gratefuler. So speaking of gratefuler, we were recounting the escapades of my summer adventure in Europe, learning learning little tidbits of classical architecture and urban planning and crafts. And when we last left off at the end of episode 2, we were discussing the kinds of things that happen in Barr when I was there, and we had gotten through the first week or so of Barr, and that week ended with me going to mass there at St. Martin's in Barr, and then we hiked up to a castle on the on the hills overlooking Barr, the Castle d'Andelot, a ruined castle overlooking Barr and the countryside. I guess it probably would, back in the day, it would serve to protect things. In its current state, there are no roads that get you to the castle. There's only footpaths. They are well marked, and it was certainly less than an hour hike up there. A little steep in some places, but generally a good-natured Sunday afternoon hike. It was a very fun thing to do. We spent the rest of the afternoon after I got back down doing some drawings and working on the kinds of things that we did pretty much during all of our free time was draw more things. When I went back through my notes for my summer school time, it was at this time when I started to note things in my notebook, which was the overarching lesson of my summer school. And after a week with these dozen other students and the handful of faculty and locals, I note in my notes that I was coming to realize that the statement I had in my notes was, this is a great group. The students were all 20, I guess 20-ish to maybe 35, something like that. All of them except for me and one other lady who was in her early 40s. It was like attending school with my kids. And that made it remarkably fun because I adore my kids and I like being with them. It's difficult as a parent to be a peer, and you're never really a peer with your kids. And one of the best things you ever get when you're with your kids is when you are in a situation where you have been outclassed by your kids. And what I found when I was in Barr, certainly this was within the first day, but when I put the realization together that I was essentially going to school with my kids, and they were completely outclassing me, that was a wonderful feeling. It provides you with a feeling of joy and hope for the future, and it was a great feeling. And all these kids of mine that were with me in Barr, and then essentially what happened in Bruges too as well, is they were all excellent scholars. They're phenomenal scholars. They were superb artists, and they were wonderfully interesting and good people. And my notes in my book was, this is a great group. And it started to hit me then after about a week here that this is lightning in a bottle. The faculty group there at La Table Ronde put together one of the great teams that I've ever been on in my 30 plus years of working in industry and in academics, and even the time before that working on school teams and other in bands and football teams and swim teams and all. This was a great group, and I started to become overwhelmed with how fortunate I was to be there. So this sentiment only continued to grow over the next 7 weeks, and certainly with the remainder that was there in Barr, and then what happened in Bruges, all the art and architecture and hikes and adventures were really nothing without the people with whom I got to share them. So for you guys who are listening out there, you know how I feel about you, and it was. Like I said, it was lightning in a bottle. So the next week out there in Barr started with a big field trip. First to a carpenter's, to see some carpenters who do half timber houses. Like I said, the timber framing is all done with mortises and peg tenons, and then batons are put between them with wet earth and straw, filling in with a lime wash. The guys that we met with, they actually take houses apart. They would fix the beams that need fixing and then make everything fit in the shop. They had, when we were visited there, they have a very large shop covered, and they would build these wall frames on the floor of the shop, lay them out, horizontally, and then make sure everything fits. Then they would take the thing apart, put the parts on the truck, take it to the new site. And when everything was done, they would put the house together back together in about 3 days. It was it's remarkable stuff to see, and it feels like the kinds of things we should be doing. But sometimes those what do they say? The wisdom of the past gets lost amongst the the newness and excitement of the future. But these guys were these carpenters were phenomenal. The main guy there was missing a pinky on one of his hands, which was an unfortunate thing. But he possessed such great joy in showing us his work. He was in love with wood, and he said, "I'm always looking to show this wood in its best light." He was showing me this one beam. To some people it's a log. To a woodworker, it's a piece of material that needs to be crafted in some way, or gets to get crafted in some way. But to this guy, this was a source of almost adoration for this guy. He showed me this, and he showed me this beam, and he said in his broken English, translated from French, he said, "The face of this wood gives me emotion." And he said, almost like when I get teary-eyed when I'm talking about whatever I talk about here, he's in love with the wood. And it was a wonderful thing to see how much joy his path, his journey toward the good, how much joy that gave him. It was remarkable. We had lunch that day in another little town called Boxwiller. We saw all sorts of by this time we were being saturated with half timber housing. It is everything that you can imagine in the fairy tales. This was classic Alsatian style. We had a grand lunch together at a local restaurant. And the thing I remember most about that was that the dessert was otherworldly. It was some sort of raspberry sorbet and some kind of custard. And my recollection of both of those flavors, because we kind of shared them because they were, because we're getting old and nobody needs double dessert. Some of us don't need even single dessert. But it was the flavors were so grand and so rich and so vibrant and so new that they induced from me nothing less than just spontaneous laughter. I put the spoon in my mouth, and both times with the raspberry sorbet and with the custard, it was a flavor that I had never experienced before. It was like seeing a new color or hearing a new sound. It was a remarkable thing, and Boxwiller was great. Then we went out and saw another house builder in the half timber style. He had a little property out in some other little town that I didn't remember its name. And he had, over the last decade, refurbished more than 3 of these half timber buildings on his property. So he had a house that he had built, and he had a workshop building, and he had another house he was working on, and then another large work building. And he had like a whole campus he was building, and he was building a campus for students to learn these house building skills. And talk about putting your money where your mouth is. This guy is living the dream. Okay, he's doing what he believes to be the good, and he is providing the future for people like him. And he and his family live in the house that he built there. That he took a house apart, brought it to his property, and rebuilt it there in the classic Alsatian style. And we were there, and we got to help do some of the stuff that he was doing on his little property there. We did some of the mud and straw infill is what it was. Take some dirt, take some straw, mix it together in a big stirring up machine, put it in there by hand on a trellis of sticks. And we did that. And it was great to see in that context. He had different pieces of the building were at different areas of construction, and you could see all of that, from what the open timber looked like, to the timber with the trellis, to the timber with the trellis with the mud, to the timber with the trellis with the mud with the lime wash over the top. He had the whole thing, and it was really eye-opening to see. It was good fun. It was a little bit messy, but it was all good all around. And then the last stop that day was a quarry for pink sandstone. There are 8 people that run this little quarry, and they pull 25-ton blocks, not 25 one-ton blocks, but blocks of mass, 25 tons of sandstone from the side of a big hill. They pull out 400 blocks a year. So that's more than one a day. This is the pink sandstone I talked about earlier that is very highly prized in France and in Germany. They're big caverns cut into the side of this hillside. The machine comes and cuts these. It's like this gigantic, like a chainsaw, but it's monstrously huge. It is. I can't. It's this big metal tongue with this chain that goes around that digs into the stone. It cuts a 3-meter deep by 7-meter high slice in 8 hours. So it starts at the top and cuts all the way down over the course of 8 hours. This kind of this water-bathed, dust-creating, inch thick or 2-inch thick gap in the sandstone, and it cuts a slice in 8 hours. So they take 5 horizontal slices and 5 vertical slices. That makes 16. Remember, because they got the edges there. Okay, so there's 4 gaps. So you have four rows and 4 columns of these blocks. So then these gigantic blocks are hanging on the wall, and then they have these pneumatic bladders that they pump up, and they snap the blocks free, and they get a gigantic, monstrously huge forklift kind of thing to carry these blocks out of the quarry. It was highly awesome. There were hard hats involved. It was dusty. There were a lot of echoes. It was nice and cool in the caverns while it was hot outside. The quarry has been there for quite a while, and centuries, I guess. And the current lease on that land should get them at least another 50 years of pink sandstone from that thing. 8 people run this little shop, and then they gave us these little. After we left, they stayed late. Okay, these people love their work, and they stayed late, and they gave us these little sandstone hearts. These little, centimeter thick and probably 4 inches. Look at me mixing my measurements. Centimeter thick and 10 centimeters across. A little like a drink coaster shaped in a heart from the pink sandstone of Alsace. It was a wonderful thing. So I have that sitting there on my desk. So the lesson from the field trips, all right, find an activity that gives you joy, all right, the kind of joy that all the craftsmen have. The house builder said he will only work with those people who are as passionate as he is. Remember, joy comes from following the path. Seek the good. Your good is the path you follow to become who you were made to be, and joy comes from following a path. So that's an easy thing. We ought not to make it hard. So find what it is that gives you joy. Find the path that gives you joy, and make sure that is a thing that is good, and you will become the person you were made to be. So much of the remainder of the Barr experience was centered on a tour of a neighboring town called Obernai, and then the final projects that we worked on. Obernai was just as another medieval walled city. They still have a lot of the wall up. You can see places where the cannons could sit there and shoot at the bad guys if they came. There's moats around the building, or around the whole town. It's wonderful if you really want to see what it was like outside of a fairy tale. So at the end of the Obernai tour, which took most of the afternoon, we stumbled across the city festival in the city square. It was a grand ordeal with food and drink and a polka band, and it was and then we got on the train back to Barr that evening. It was a great visit. There was a party in Barr on the night before Bastille Day, because it was in France, right? So there's another small town party, and everybody comes out for these towns. It's great comes out for these parties in these little towns. It's a wonderful civic event, and it's not like outside of town at the big corporate menu and drinks cost you $50 or something like that. At most of these places, you could get a small beer for 2.5 euros. And when you returned the reusable plastic cup, you received your deposit back of €2. So the beers were 50 cents, and people really liked that. And it there weren't these gigantic big gulp kinds of beers that we can get here in the States that cost you $45. These were small beers for people living right sized, I think is probably the right way to put it. And they were both grand festivals. The final projects were assignments that were given to us either individually or in groups. Most of these little projects centered on making adjustments to buildings or public areas in Barr that were maybe not consistent with the concept of the Alsatian style that Barr was seeking to display. So, for example, one group worked on a proposal for the tannery in town that was soon going to be abandoned. One group worked on some city gates. One guy worked on some plan for some public housing, and I was assigned two things. I think they gave me the baby projects because I was the baby architect in the group. But I was assigned a storefront on one of the streets in town and an entrance to a parking lot, which seems like kind of a goofy thing, but it was actually probably it was a very good thing to do. So the storefront was actually two stores. There was a left store and a right store, and in between them was a car portal for entrance to the courtyard area for the people who live above the store. The facade was dated, actually it was redone in the 50s, and it was bland, it was utilitarian, it was ugly and generally unimpressive for a store that was on the main street of a cute little Alsatian town. It needed upgrading to become worthy of the historic town that Barr is. So the parking lot was kind of an eyesore on another primary street. It was just a parking lot. So how good could it be, right? It's a flat space, and there's some cars parked in there, and there's some dumpsters at the end, and it kind of linked up to this to another parking lot in the back, and then it also linked up to another parking lot, which is behind another building. So there were some kind of connections inside the town here. And the parking lot actually was named, it was dedicated toward an early 20th century doctor and scientist who came from Barr, one Jules Stahl, Stahl, 1902 to 1984. He was some famous doctor guy in Europe, and he was from Barr. So let's name a little parking lot thing after him. So we got these assignments on early in the week, and then we did things like we surveyed our lots. We measured the widths of the buildings, and we got information on restrictions like how much room do you need for a gate into a parking lot when the parking lot houses dumpsters? How big does that have to be? How much room do you have in the street outside? What does it look like when you're trying to exit the street, the parking lot into the street? How much view is there? Do you need special room for handicap spaces or motorcycles or bicycles or anything like that? So, and we sought out things that looked Barr-esque, maybe Alsatian, that sort of thing. And we set out to make drawings. So I redid the building facade for the storefront to a character that was more Alsatian, wooden window frames and a pretty arch over the entranceway, some pretty apartment windows, that sort of thing. I used this the people that were there running the program provided excellent advice on, here's some things you could do, here's some things you might want to do, here's some things to shy away from. They came up with this. There's an idea in architecture, I guess you call it, art and architecture, that called trompe-l'oeil. And it's French for deceiving the eye. And what you do is you paint fancy 3D paintings on the outside of buildings, which makes them look like they have very fancy windowsills or jambs or lintels or something like that. And so they said that is not an uncommon thing in other places in Alsace. And there are certain towns in Europe that have the whole towns are painted in this stuff, and it looks really fancy from a distance, and you get up close and you're like, hey, wait, that's a painting. So you can see these, some of the paintings from Pompeii. So some of the walls that they have discovered from Pompeii had this kind of 3D painting on them to make things look interesting. Oftentimes, murals in cities will have this trompe-l'oeil thing on them. It's spelled TROMPEL''OEIL. It's one of those words that it's impossible to spell if you're just a guy from a farm town in Wisconsin, but it's a very fancy thing. So I did some redoing of that sort of thing once for the higher parts of the building to keep costs down. We did some, like I said, windowsills and window jambs and lintels that were more in keeping with the style of the town. We made them all unique and individual, having little details that reflected things in the area, like little storks or the coat of arms for Barr, that sort of thing. And then we put some grapevines on the building in paint as a nod, or what do they call it, a hat tip to the wineries that are all over this area of Alsace. So that was kind of a fun thing to do. And then the other part was the parking lot. And like I said, it was connected to an almost concealed to another parking lot through an almost concealed passageway that you could only find if you wandered around in the back and peeked behind some bushes. You could figure out that these two things were connected, and they were connected essentially to the tannery as well. So we discovered that this parking lot and the other parking lot and the tannery all kind of connected together and had the opportunity for, I guess I'll call it, a grand downtown civic space right in the center of the city. And it looked to me like a great place for a farmer's market or Oktoberfest site, or, the spring flower show or whatever you wanted to do. So I worked with the young lady that was doing the other parking lot, and we kind of jointly tried to tie the two gates for these parking lots together. So the idea was that when you drive down this street, you see beautiful building, beautiful building, beautiful building, ugly parking lot, beautiful building. And the idea was to take the ugly parking lot thing and put a gate in front of it so that you tell the people that are driving by that there's something important here behind the gate. That's the purpose of the architecture there, is to separate the spaces and help you determine what's on the other side. So we put gates up here, a gate that has this, that says, like I said, it protects something important on the inside, but allows cars to go through that you need. It would allow a truck to come through to empty out the dumpsters. I guess you need that. And bicycles and pedestrians, and then also provide, but not just like a wall, so you don't know what's back there. So we put some see-throughness and some solidity to them. The feminine gate was light and airy, large, lacy wooden timber arches with trellises to support some flowering vines and some benches, a very, very feminine approach. And then mine was designed to be kind of in contrast to that, very, very heavy and substantial, a large stone wall and an arched gate with some inset stone benches on them, and some ornaments like the coat of arms for Barr. And I added a flask and a staff of Asclepius, that snake wrapped around the stick, the doctor sign, to honor the local doctor. I think currently, if you go there's just a little sign that says something like, this parking lot is dedicated to Jules Stahl, but I thought he needed some, a little bit more flair there at the parking lot. So that was the parking lot and the storefront. And so we drew these things over the next couple of days. And on the last day there, which was on Monday, we had all our work on display for people to come and see and to praise and to criticize whatever they wanted to do. And the most amazing thing about this, outside of the drawings were great, and the stuff people put together was these 12 other students and then me. They put together this just incredible display of artistic, creativity, but within a framework. Remember, right? Creativity is without boundaries. It's just noise. Everything fit in this Alsatian. I'm going to work on that word, Alsatian style. It fit within Barr, and it provided a fresh new life to a lot of these buildings. So the work these guys did was just incredible. All that aside, what was stunning to me was all the people we had met over the previous 2 weeks came. They all came. We saw the mayor. We saw the lady that on the first day gave us the tour of Barr, and who turned out to be the same lady that gave us the tour of the cathedral in Strasbourg. She was there. We saw the newspaper guy who did the interviews and wrote the article. We saw the stone carver from the field trip. The woodworker guy was there. I mean, it was like a campy 1950s Disney movie, but it was in real life, and it was it was like a movie. It was actually like being on the set of a movie in real life, like that Jim Carrey movie where everything's a setup, and the Truman Show. It was like that. Everybody you've ever seen was in there again. Everybody came back for a cameo at the end, and so they looked at all the stuff, and we talked about how we were doing it, and we had translators come because not all of them spoke English, and I apologize. My French did not get a whole lot better while I was there. And we had our little show, and we took a group picture, and then it was over. And about an hour after the presentation was done, the group had split up. People caught trains to take them to the airports and places beyond. Some groups set out and caught trains going out of Strasbourg and other bigger cities nearby. I spent an extra day in Strasbourg and then headed to Cologne in Germany to see the cathedral there. It took over 600 years to complete. Beautiful cathedral surrounded by a dense, modern, urban city. Produced a little bit some chagrin from me after having spent 2 weeks in Barr. And two of my fellow students and I went to Bruges eventually, up in Belgium for the next summer school, which started later at that next weekend. And there were 30 new students waiting there in Bruges to become my new friends over the next 5 weeks. So in the end, Barr was magnificent. It was beauty. It was magic. It was like a little fairy tale. A dozen other students that were all wonderfully incredible human beings. Lots of work. We were up early every morning and worked late at night. There was a lot of fun, all packed into 16 magical days. And Bruges would promise to be the same thing, but 2.5 times in length. So when we continue this summer school recap, we will pick up when I get to Bruges later in the summer and discuss the magical city there in the northern part of Belgium, in West Flanders. But until that time, we will ask you to seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish, and enjoy the adventure of life.
It's going to be a great day.